As a copywriter, you're going to get invited to write for small groups, small businesses, nonprofits. And it's very important for you to understand that while you have these writing skills as a copywriter or a marketer, your main goal is to get paid for writing. Now, I'm Justin Hitt with Head Briefing's copywriting tips, and we're going to share a little bit of insights about what do you do if you're going to take on a volunteer position, because volunteer positions do have the opportunity to get you engagement and interaction with decision makers. They have the opportunity if you have special interests. For example, I'm in the Master Naturalist program for Virginia, and I'm going to maintain a certification in that environment. I'm going to go for a certification. And so the volunteer hours as their blog master or a content producer, or even working on a committee producing educational materials, is a benefit to me as a naturalist, but it also is benefit to me as a copywriter. These opportunities may come up for you as well. Key thing to understand is before you accept any position where you will be writing at any capacity is that you are a professional writer. So you need to make sure that everything is structured in such a way so that they get the best content possible, that you have clear expectations, and that there is no expectation of you either getting paid or yes, you're getting paid, because they're very often when the volunteer position, they want you to provide the full level and measure of your services. So here's the example. Let's say you're taking on a volunteer opportunity as a new copywriter. Well, you may want to create a portfolio of materials that's appropriate for the nonprofit organization, but is clearly defined so that it has a clear set of deliverables, and you deliver that so that you gain interaction opportunities with other individuals. So if you're in a nonprofit, you might have the opportunity to interview people who you may not be able to otherwise interact with, and then let them know about your services after you're finished with your term. So there's something real important that I set up there is that while you're volunteering for a nonprofit organization, it is not ethical to directly use that, unless it's a business organization, directly use that to get clients. So I've been a member of various organizations. I've worked for Institute for Procurement Managers. I've worked for Toastmasters, started clubs, a lot of different things. While you're in the capacity of an officer for a club or a service organization, you are not to go get clients from them. And I want to lay this out up front so that there's no hard feelings. Now, in your mind, you might be thinking, hey, I'm a professional copywriter and I'm performing copywriting services. Therefore, it's expected that I should be able to get clients out of this. And that is not why you work for a nonprofit organization. So we're going to use the skills of copywriting and marketing to promote the organization, but we're going to frame the expectations so that they know that if you're the blog master, you're going to be doing 12 feature length articles. A feature length article is going to be 400 words, and your expectations of the group is that they'll provide photographs, ideas, concepts, and such. So we're going to walk through this, and we're going to start from the beginning. So the two key ideas or two key deliverables you need before you start the position is number one, an editorial guidelines. So your editorial guidelines will clearly identify what is the scope of the writing work that you'll be doing, what is the deliverables expected. Now, some people might want daily and weekly unique content, and that's not something you need to be doing as a professional writer. A single blog post can be $150, $250, depending on what you're doing. A package of 12 could be $12,000 a year because, of course, with every article that you produce, you're going to need to have the social media advertisements. You're going to need to have the excerpts that you're going to use in a newsletter to point to the article itself. If you want copy done the right way, it is a part-time effort for one client. And so if you're doing a volunteer position and they're saying, hey, I want daily content, they need to understand that writing a blog post is not the only thing that needs to happen if that blog post is going to be effective. You also have to be aware that they're not measuring the number of articles, but instead measuring the outcome or result to produce. Now, you as a copywriter or marketer may want to say, hey, I'll give you 12 articles and I'll give you 12 social media posts and I'll give you, one tailored brochure You might want to just give the deliverables, but really, if you want to be effective for the organization, for example, when I've written for nonprofits and others, I would treat them just like a client. And I'd say, hey, what are the metrics that we need to have in order to see success in the content we're producing? And now, what does that mean? Well, for a training organization such as a naturalist program, they need a certain number of inquiries. They need a certain number of basic students, people who actually show up for the basic training, and then they need a number of individuals who become certified as a content or communications program, because it's not just managing blogs. You might volunteer to be on the public relations committee. You might volunteer to be on a communications committee with an internal newsletter. You may be on a calendar or some kind of schedule that has to do with communications. You don't want to produce content for the sake of producing content. That content needs to better the organization. It needs to follow the missions of the organization and ultimately derive a growth in that organization, whether it's funds raised or it's new members or it's dues collected. Those are the metrics that you want. So, again, your guidelines are going to outline the brand information, which is fine, the authorized sources to get information from, or preferred sources to get information from, which could be a table of individuals who have specialty information or scheduling or whatever you need to put into a newsletter, to put into a blog post, to put into an email newsletter, to put into all kinds of different things. You're also going to need to set the expectations, deliverables. You also want to make sure that you have it very clear the ownership of the materials. So I won't be a blog manager and create original content that I don't mutually own. So if I write a 1,500 word article and it's about topics, I'm going to position myself as an expert. I'm going to pick two or three other people and position them as experts as well. But I'm going to own the rights to that material to use it in another place or a derivative of that particular item. Now, some organizations, they own the rights, and you have to clarify this up front. So, in the case of working for a state organization or a larger nonprofit, the materials you write could be work for hire, meaning everything you write they own and you can't touch. Now, with a mutual exclusive agreement, they can use it and you can use it. But usually for a nonprofit, I will figure out the mutual exclusive agreement, determine the monetary value of it, and then donate my monetary value back to them. So that's something you would talk about with your CPA. But ultimately, if you're creating intellectual property for an organization, do you need either to be compensated or you need to be otherwise, uh, you know, getting a good return out. Like, for example, I'm very passionate about conservation, ecology, stuff like that. So I would be contributing to public domain materials, and having a byline in those materials is enough for me. So I would get paid in credentials. Maybe you're working for a procurement association and your specialty is procurement, but you're also doing copywriting and marketing, and you're on their membership committee and you're writing membership follow-up letters, you may have no interest in owning that in the future. But then again, if you produce 24 of these membership follow-up letters, you could package them into an information product, and that may have value outside of the organization. Again, an operational guide or an editorial guidelines is going to be specific about what type of rights what kind of compensation is in the program itself. Another thing you want to look at is the features. So if you're going to write a blog or some kind of periodic newsletter, what are the common features that you're going to use? So, for example, are you going to have like a curious finds? So, in the naturalist group, we go out on trips and we take pictures and we see cool stuff and we want to just kind of highlight the cool stuff. So, that would be a photograph, and this is moving towards the editorial guidelines. That would be a photograph with a paragraph underneath describing what's in the picture, and then maybe one or two links to additional resources. And a curious finds might have three of those on a page, and that's the blog post. So you want to define the different kinds of content that you're going to create. What's the characteristics of that content, and then kind of what's the expectation of putting that particular piece of content together. A curious finds or quick tip type of content is very easy to produce, but you want to make sure that you're got the rights to the images, for example, or that you're properly sourcing any kind of reference material, or that you're otherwise not plagiarizing something that's available on the internet. These are very critical concepts to be thinking about that most organizations, it's going to go over their head. They're not really going to understand it, and you have to explain it to them. The key thing is that you explain, hey, look, I'm a professional in the public relations world, or I'm the professional in the copywriting world, and we want to make sure that you stay compliant with the rules and regulations. Now, the good news is if you're working with a large nonprofit, you can usually download their communications guidelines or their editorial guidelines, and then you can simply add to the deliverables of your overall operational guide what you're going to deliver. So, what other features can you have in a newsletter style or a blog? Well, you can have outreach articles. Those are going to be outreach articles that work with the partners, the sponsors, the other people in the group that are kind of informing the audience about of events that are coming up, about new features that are available in the community. You want to have highlight articles. So instead of covering a very detailed topic that may have a small audience, you want to have a highlight article that covers 3 or 4 topics, all related to some central theme. And then maybe you have links out to other websites that provide detailed information. You might have biographical or historical information about the club itself. I remember doing in Toastmasters, when Toastmasters anniversary came around, we would write a little bit about the history of Toastmasters and the benefits of Toastmasters. When you go down the list of the different things you have, you can write down 5 or 10 of them in your guide, and then that's all the content you produce. If somebody comes up during the course of the year and says, wouldn't it be nice if you put it in the guidelines and address it next year? Because again, you don't want this to be a full-time job. As a copywriter, as a marketing professional, you want this to be part of your community interaction. The final thing is you want to make sure that they have engagement. Many nonprofits don't have the engagement necessary to be worth the time and effort that goes into their communications. So, for example, they have blogs that nobody ever visits. And you could, they don't have 1,000 visitors a month or even a year. And so why put in the volume of traffic there when other media may be more valuable? So for example, being featured in other people's blogs or even the newspaper may have more value to the organization. And that's why we talked about metrics very early in this. There's a couple other factors that we could talk about in building your editorial calendar and building your editorial guidelines, building out your brand strategy, because a lot of nonprofits believe in brand. They're not going to understand the direct response stuff that we talk about. But ultimately, when you know your metrics, that's the best thing that you can focus on, because you don't want to get stuck in a volunteer position where you're churning out content, because you know that we can hire a copywriter for very cheap. We can hire somebody overseas. We can use an AI tool and they could put that content together. And then all we got to do is publish it, especially for a low traffic site. Be really clear about what you'll deliver and what you expect from the groups. So if you want to cover those other elements, such as the editorial calendar, and you want to cover other elements such as the guidelines, building out those guidelines, then make sure you visit www.adbriefings.co.uk. I'm Justin Hitt. If you go to the website, www.adbriefings.co.uk, and go to the contact page and ask your questions, I'll be the one answering them, and I will answer them in a podcast like we're doing right now. I want to thank you for being a part of what we're doing here. We help copywriters and marketers build their book of business so that they can have residual income, so that they can have an agency level income, and ultimately benefit from words that sell. I want to, again, thank you for being a part of this. Visit the website, like and subscribe down below, and thanks for watching.